I'm happy to be here. Great to have you here. The goal for today is to talk through some of the most important elements of a successful investor pitch. So we're going to be talking through common mistakes, best practices, everything supported by the data I've been able to collect after being in this world for many years and seeing many pitches. And we'll get into that. Let's be clear. Today is about business storytelling. But it's more than that. A pitch deck is more than just a pretty PowerPoint. It is the most important piece of marketing collateral that you will ever own, which is the ability to influence others, the ability to have a story that people care about, make them care, make them listen, and make them adopt a vision of what the world is in the way that you think it should be. With that said, a bit about myself. So I've been in the startup world for about 20 years. These days, I run a company called VentureCraft, and our firm's dedicated to helping early stage companies commercialize, raise capital, and basically translate complicated technical ideas into stuff that regular people can appreciate. I've had a broad range of roles in the startup world. Initially, I started off as a marketing branding guy. I worked with a handful of Y Combinator companies, deployed campaigns that have reached over 600 million people around the world. And from there, I got more into operations, was corporate counsel of a small investment group for a few years, and then had the opportunity to sprout out and kind of focus on what we're going to be talking about here today. To date, my clients have raised a little north of $400 million using the same thing that we're going to be talking about today. And I want to be clear, we're going to cover a lot today. The reason for that is because I've seen these presentations where people focus on like one thing, and that's neat, but like a story is about many things that comes together and works together to kind of pull up different parts of your story. If you have a really strong, market sizing, we're going to talk about the importance of a go-to-market. If you have a really ambitious ask, we're going to talk about, different pieces to support you actually being able to raise that money. So we're going to cover the entirety of kind of what it means to actually pitch an idea in a way that raises investor money. And with that said, we're going to start with kind of your pre-flight check. So there's three things to think about when you are trying to raise capital. The first is know your goal. So one of the biggest mistakes that I run into when it comes to companies that are trying to raise capital is they don't know kind of what it means to actually raise money. They think in their head it's like Shark Tank, where if you pitch well enough, at the end of it, people clap and then they hand you a check and then you're off. That's not how it works in the real world. In the real world, the way it works is you're going to attempt to say things, arm your audience with information, words, concepts necessary about your company so that they get it, they understand it, they can go back to their friends, their family, their loved ones, they can explain it to them, and then ultimately convince themselves and others that this is a really good idea. That's how investment works. That's how every investment works. You plant a seed of an idea in the investor's mind in a way that they actually understand what it is you do so that they can get excited about it and they can advocate to others about it. Like they have enough of a tangible understanding that it means something to them. And then that's when they say, you know what, I don't want to miss out on this opportunity. I'm going to invest. If you're too complicated, if your pitch is like it requires a PhD to understand it, it's not going to connect. If it doesn't connect, they're going to forget about it. And then the next day when they're on the golf course and they ask, hey, what cool stuff did you see? They're not going to be able to remember what it is you do. And if they can't remember what it is you do, they're likely not going to trust you enough to put money into it. So again, the goal is to tell a story that your audience, it'll resonate with your audience will understand, and they'll be able to take it with them so that they can tell others about it later on. The second thing to think through is know your audience. So knowing your audience means understanding kind of what's their level of sophistication with the information that you're presenting. So audiences come in like a spectrum. On one end, you have your parents or someone that is likely a non-technical person that you have to be extremely simple to make them understand what it is you're talking about. On the other end of the spectrum, you have what we call strategic investors. You have investors who might have a PhD or might have that extra knowledge where you can get into the deep, deep specifics of what it is you do. What I like to focus on is more towards the general investor side of it. Why? Because if you can pitch to a general investor, someone who, wants to know what it is you do, but maybe doesn't have that technical understanding to really, grasp too many acronyms or too many deep details of the tech. If you can sell them on it, selling the easier sells when people already have a built-in amount of understanding of jargon, or they already understand your market, they already care. If they already have a built-in level of care, easy to sell to them. If they don't, if it's just a general investor where you are one of 100 pitches they're going to hear that week, we have to really make sure it resonates with them, really make sure it comes through clear and something that makes sense to them. So let's put a big asterisk on this. If you know that your audience is technical or your audience wants to hear something in a certain way, always adapt to your audience. So if you know, like you have a fintech company, or talk to like the CTO of some like crypto or bank or something like that, yeah, be more technical, just feel free. But the default should be assuming that, we're gonna have to acclimate the audience to knowing what it is we're talking about. The third thing is format. Biggest mistake I see is people pitch the wrong decks. There are two types of presentation formats. There is a presentation deck and there's an email deck. A presentation deck, as the name would imply, is a deck that you are presenting. Right now, as I talk to you, this is a presentation deck. That means I want you to listen to me and I want you to read the stuff I have on the slides. But I know that you, like most people, probably struggle with doing both at the same time. We are usually bad at trying to read and listen, so we only do one, which means that if there's a lot of stuff to read, I'm either going to not read it to listen to you, or I'm going to listen to you and not read the deck. So presentation decks need to strike this balance of enough of information to be a hype man, to hit on all the bullets that I want you to know to support my talk track, but not enough that you start to ignore me, start to zone out. Another way to think about it is I want to control your eyes. I want you to look where I want you to look. I want you to see what I want you to see. I want you to take in information as I want you to take it in. I want to control the flow of this conversation. The other type of deck is an email deck. More wordy because it has to be. Email decks live without a narrator. They get put out of the world. You wish them luck. And because of that, they usually are a bit more wordy. But an email deck should never be a presentation deck, but I see it all the time. I see it where you just have these wordy decks that nobody's going to read. So don't do it. If like you want to take advantage and optimize this type of engagement where people are engaged, but they don't feel overwhelmed with that text. Now, this is what we're going to be talking about today. We have all the slides here on the left. Again, it looks pretty deep, but some are going to be deeper than others. The goal is to show how everything comes together as a cohesive story. And specifically, I know we're talking about the theme for today is how this applies to impact companies. Impact companies are companies that have, some sort of beyond just ROI type of incentive, especially need an important story. Because if you get too caught up in that emotional tie of just, let's make an impact, let's believe in it, and that's it, that can work great for certain types of investors who are bordering on, like charity types of investments or grants. But what we're shooting for is any idea that can raise investor capital, or you're trying to raise investor capital, should have these components where even if there is an impact value to it, we can showcase the underlying business value, business model, or just scalability of it. Something that shows that there's a product market fit that is so important, that it's not just an emotional sell. It's not something where we're just doing it for the sake of doing it. We're doing it because it's worth doing. It can actually cause that impact, but it's a viable company. It's a viable company with a viable model. With that said, the first thing on every investor deck or any deck where you're trying to motivate the audience to kind of join your side or your view of the world is the problem slide. It's making the audience feel the pain. Our job is to establish the what is before revealing the what could be. This means that we're starting with a strong problem statement that clearly describes the pain that your business is going to solve. And so the goal of a strong problem statement is to enable your audience to empathize with those who feel the pain and identify and understand kind of like, what's the point? What are we doing here today? The pain should be felt by your customers. Another common mistake that we see is that people try to focus on maybe the end user of the product, not necessarily the customer. Like, for example, if you're Facebook, your end user is you and me, but your customer is advertisers. If you're Disneyland, the end user is my toddler generally, and the customer, though, is the parent. Like, you're really trying to figure out at the end of the day in your deck, who's the customer? Like, and what is the pain that you're solving for the person that's actually going to give you money? And from there, we want to try to quantify it. People like to use fluffy words, and investors see right through that. So fluffy words are things that are like, hospitals are struggling to keep up with decontaminated patient rooms. This was actually a problem statement for one of the clients I worked with. What does that mean? What does struggling mean? What does it mean that, like, decontaminating patient, like, why do I care? Well, we looked into the data and we were able to show that, like, actually, no, 60% of the hospitals that were using his product showed a huge 35%, I'm sorry, 30, sorry, should be decreased. 60% of the hospitals that were not using this type of product had this huge increase of the of deaths related to the unsanitary conditions of the room. And so we're tying it to, like, we all have people or friends or family that are in the hospital. We know what it's like to be vulnerable and be worrying about our health. But now we can actually quantify, like, a world with our technology can save lives. We can quantify it. We can show you actual math and numbers to say that it's not just my opinion that this product should exist. Without it, people are being hurt. The world is being impacted. And especially for impact style startups, you can tie this in fairly well with what is the goal? What's the impact you're trying to make? Quantify how you can increase the value of that impact or reduce the pain caused by sort of the absence of that impact due to the absence of your technology being available. Once we have your problem statement established, the next thing we want to do is introduce the hero. The hero, or the solution, what's kind of nice about it is it logically mirrors the problem statement. What I mean is if you tell me that the pain is, there's a wasting time or wasting money or inefficiency, then your solution should logically tie somehow into that. Because if it doesn't, then we have suddenly a gap. And one of the goals, or one of the jobs of an investor, is to connect dots, but your job as the presenter is to push those dots as close together as possible and show them kind of how is this problem statement and the solution related. So if the pain is also, let's say, failed user experience, I want to know how do you improve that? How does your solution go to fix that user experience that your market is struggling with, or if it is implementation of a technology, how are you more efficient? How do you save money? Like, tie together, because if I walk away wondering, okay, I know what it is you do, but I have no idea what it has to do with that initial problem, they're going to be so distracted by that that you're going to lose them as you make your way through the rest of your presentation. So we're starting off with a clear problem statement so they know, do I believe it's real? Do I believe you have a problem that I care about? We go to the solution statement because that lets me know, hey, I believe that you have a way to solve that problem. The next thing we want to hit on is the TAM, SAM, and SOM. So this one is one we're going to deep dive a little bit because it's one that people commonly struggle with. But it is one of the most important pieces of information that you can have in your slide. So at this point, there's some people that might be looking at this and thinking, hey, I don't know, what a TAM, SAM, SOM is. I don't understand why it's valuable. So let's unpack it. A TAM, SAM, SOM is a total available market, a serviceable available market, and a serviceable obtainable market. So the most common mistake we see in this world of trying to define your market in these buckets is people say, well, my market's worth $10 billion. And so if I just get 1% of that, I'm rich. Doesn't work that way. That is what's called a top-down calculation, which no investor ever trusts because it's just you kind of grasping at straws. What they want to see is you actually put effort into calculating your market sizing. Because if you can show me that you actually can calculate out these numbers, it makes you that much more confident. It makes me believe that you actually know what you're talking about. You know your market, you know how to find your market. And so with that said, I'm going to use my own company to show you how I would calculate out my TAM SAM SOM. So I have a company called Bar Prep Buddy that helps law students study for the bar. It's a side hustle passion project. We currently have 3,000 law students on the platform at 200 different law schools. And if I were trying to calculate a TAM SAM SOM, the first thing I would start with is my TAM. Why? Because the TAM it's kind of setting the boundaries of our universe. So your TAM is an imaginary, unachievable, completely hypothetical number that no company will ever achieve. Google will never achieve its TAM. Apple will never achieve its TAM. No company can ever actually achieve this number. And so you might be wondering, well, then why is it worth talking about? Like, if nobody actually achieves their TAM, then why do we care about it? We care because it forces you to draw a line in the sand. What this does is it forces you to define, if 100% of the market bought your product, what's it worth? Because if you did that and you come back and it's like 20 million bucks, okay, but I know immediately not investable. Doesn't matter if I like your problem, I like your solution. $20 million, if you own 100% of your market, which I know you never will, it's just not big enough. But as we start talking about like $1 billion market, well, then suddenly I know that, okay, this is something worth at least finding out about. So again, if we were going to calculate a TAM for me, it would be, I charge 50 bucks a month for my SaaS-based product. I know that at any given point, there's 114,000 law students in the country. It means the TAM will never be more than about $69 million per year. And so this sets a boundary. This knows that 100% penetration of my market, 100% adoption from my user base, is worth about 69 million bucks. The next thing we're going to do is zoom in on that SOM, which is that little circle. The reason we do that is because we kind of want to see now, what's the lowest hanging fruit? So I know the size of my universe is 69 million bucks, but where am I going to start? And what's nice about your SOM is that your SOM loves you. Your SOM accepts you for who you are. The SOM knows that you are a young company with limited resources, with limited time, with limited everything. And so the SOM wants to know, what can you kill in like your first 5 years? Like, what markets can you target? What can you go out and actually find? And so again, if I were to do this to myself, I would say, well, hey, I'm one person living in Southern California. It's kind of a side project, so I'm not really, dumping too much time into it. And so, hey, let's focus on Southern California. I live in Southern California. There's 17 law schools in my backyard. Each law school has about 300 students a pop, 300 times 17 times 50 bucks a month. And suddenly I get a SOM. I know that's what I'm going to shoot for in the 5 years. I'm not going to go drive to Alabama and try to sell some random law school. I'm not going to go, up to Canada and try to diversify into international markets. No, why would I? I'm going to focus on the lowest hanging fruit in my market, which is just geographically the law schools around me. Now we have a ceiling. Now we have a floor. We're going to talk about our SAM next. Our SAM is kind of the more logical TAM or a realistic TAM. So your SAM is, after I dominate that SOM and I burst out of it, where do I go next? I probably am going to look at other big centers. I'm going to look at maybe Northern California. Maybe I'm going to look at Texas, Florida. There are certain markets that make sense for me to spend money to follow high concentrations of law students. It wouldn't make much sense for me to go to like Louisiana at all. I mean, for the one attorney currently watching this, they might get a chuckle out of that, but they have their own like legal system there that I do not use in my app at all. Like it would cost me more money than necessary. And so they're not part of that next step. My next step is that logical, where do I flow from after I dominate those companies in my backyard? And there we go. That is a bottom up calculated TAM, SAM, SOM calculation of market sizing. And the hope is, as you hear this, you should be like, damn, that guy really knows his market. He knows where they are, how much they're worth, how to find them, where he would go. He sounds like if I gave him money, he knows how to spend it. And that's the level of confidence I want you to have when you're pitching your idea to the investor. They should feel like, man, this person knows where their market is, how big their market is. They're not just going to use my money as tuition. Now, a quick note though, does anyone see a problem with this slide? Like if I was trying to raise investor money, and feel free to raise a hand, put it in the chat. Does anyone see anything on this slide that's like, hey, I don't think that would fly if you're trying to raise investor money? And I'll just tap the chat. Hey, Cynthia, oh man, good to have you here. So the problem is it's too small. Like the reality on this is, again, this is my passion project. If I were to look at this after I calculate it out, this is really tiny. Like this is something where an investor would probably look at this and be like, hey, I don't know. Like this, I'm going to have to either increase my pricing or find a way to beef up these numbers to attract an investor. But that's the value of doing the calculation. It empowers you to think like, hey, what can I change to make this more powerful? All right. Next step is your go-to-market strategy. This is kind of related to what we just talked about before. Your SOM is in a way related to that go-to-market strategy, because at the end of the day, one of the things we want to convince an investor of is you just need gas in the tank. And what I mean by that is you're not just going to take the investor money and then try to figure out, where do I start first? Who do I hire? Like, who am I going to talk to? What partnership should I have? You should know who can you leverage already? Do you have existing relationships, existing partnerships, existing beachhead leverage in some market? Do you have some way to get started chasing that market size without having to figure it out? Because if I'm an investor and I believe that you don't really have a go-to-market strategy, what that tells me is that you're going to kind of just take my money and then, maybe Google it or ask ChatGPT. And that's a huge red flag. It's a huge risk factor. You want to communicate something that gives confidence to the investor that you know what that next step is. Like if you had money today, what do you attack tomorrow? Like what is your strategy to actually getting to that milestone or that market fit? Now, once you have that whole, you get to market, the next thing that an investor would want to know logically is who you're going to run into, which is going to be then your competition slide. So at this point, they know your problem, they know your solution, they know your market's big enough that they should pay attention because they can make some money. They know how you're going to get to market. And now they kind of want to know who's going to be upset that you are in the market now. Who are those competitors that I need to worry about copying what it is that makes you special? And the first thing that we start off with is, do you have competitors? And the answer to that should always be yes. A common mistake that we see is people say, no, I don't have competitors. And that's the worst possible answer that you can have. You might think that it sounds like a good thing that you don't have competitors, but what an investor hears is, I'm going to burn a ton of money having to educate people on why they need this. Because a market without competitors usually isn't actually a market. You should really push to find some competitor that you are going to supplant in the market. And the best example I can think of is, if you were the first mousetrap, if you were legitimately the first person to strap a piece of wood to a spring and put a piece of cheese on it, you could say, like, I don't have competitors, because again, technically you don't, but technically you kind of do. Because if we define the market or the problem as, a rodent issue, then your house cat is a competitor, because your market understands that they have too many mice, and your market is trying to solve that problem by utilizing the only technology they have, which is this organic furry thing that coughs up hairballs. I need to feed it, sleep sometimes, doesn't listen to me. And all those things I just listed are reasons that my mousetrap is superior to that. So when I go to try to sell to the market, I'm saying, look, the market knows they have an issue. They've adopted this solution. Though it is a cute solution, we are better for these various reasons. And you really want to dig deep. You want to dig deep to try to identify who is your competitor, even if it means kind of being creative. If I were to ask you, who are common competitors to the airline industry, I would assume many of you would say, well, automobiles and trains and boats. And that's true if we define the problem as moving things or people from one place to another. But when we actually look into the business model of the airline, and which was revealed through COVID, airlines rely on business travelers. So a large chunk of the business model for an airline is moving executives to see other executives so that they can exchange ideas. And suddenly, when the problem is facilitating the connection of two parties so that they can communicate in a way that's more personable than a phone call, what we saw is Zoom become a huge competitor to the airline industry, something that the airline industry is still dealing with because COVID forced everyone to sort of acclimate to, hey, I don't actually need to fly to do a deal. I can hop on Zoom. They're comfortable with it. I'm comfortable with it. And that hit their margins like really hard. It's something that, do I feel like they'll rebound from it? Yes. But that is something where if you were an airline industry trying to think through who are my actual competitors, it would be fair for you to think like, well, technically, these are some technology competitors that we need to worry about, or we need to think about how they could disrupt our current business model. So after we identify our competitors, the next thing to do is think through all those reasons I mentioned before. What makes you better? Or what are those feature value propositions that your customer thinks about when they're trying to identify a possible solution? So sometimes that's like price. If I'm a customer for something, I'm usually out there trying to figure out, who's the cheapest option, or who's someone that that is something I can afford within my budget. Accuracy, support, whether a new feature like AI, these are the things that your audience or your customer is out there Googling to try to find your solution. And so we're going to take those and then port them over into what we call a competitive matrix. A competitive matrix is the quickest way to acclimate your audience to what is it that you do and how does it compare to your competitors. This one slide shows me who are the main players in the market that I need to worry about, and why are you better? Do I believe that you're better? Like, I want to see you commit to certain value props that put you head to head against these competitors, so that I can think, okay, I believe you. Like, I believe this is a value prop that's defensible and something that's, again, worth listening a bit more to figure out if this is something I'm going to invest in. Now pause again, and for the sake of time, I'll answer my own question, but there's something wrong with this slide that we see a lot when it comes to pitches. That problem is D. D has no checks, no nothing, which means it's not a competitor. If you're going to have someone on your slide as a potential competitor, you need to show me at least one thing that they do that is a comparison to you. Because if they don't have that, then what you're communicating is that you just kind of want to fluff out your slide with, maybe you want to put Facebook up there because everyone knows it. And then like, look how much better we are. But it just doesn't make sense unless there's some overlap with what they're doing against your company. So at this point, the audience should know what it is you do, why they should care, how much money there is to be made, and who else is out there that might try to prevent you from making that money. But how are you actually going to make money? I can't tell you how many people forget to put this slide into their decks. The audience wants to know, like, what's your business model? Do you charge money? Is it ad based? Are you going to sell hardware? Do you have a disposable, like a razor blade, razor model? What are your margins? Give me, as an investor, the ability to decide, do I believe that's a viable business model? If you have some dating app and then you tell me that your business model is to charge $1,000 per month, okay, I know that I don't believe that. I don't believe the market's that's not gonna work. I want you to commit to knowing that you have an actual business model and telling me about it so that I can, be critical of it. Because if you don't, then it makes me think that you just don't have it. And a company that doesn't know its business model is just more risky than a company that does. And so it's another important slide to get across as you're trying to talk to your audience. So we are now up to about the halfway point of the pitch, and we're at traction. Traction is the why should I believe you? Traction is something where at the end of the day, I know that you're trying to tell me your thing is amazing. Your service is amazing. Your product is amazing. You're a salesperson. Your audience knows it, but your biggest enemy is the collective memory of investors who have been desensitized to hype. They've heard everyone say like, "Oh, people love this." But why do you believe that? Why do you actually believe anyone is going to actually use your product? Hopefully, you have something other than just your faith that that's going to be true. Hopefully you have subscribers or surveys or studies or sales or something that you can say, look, someone more than me and my mom think that this is a great idea, and I can verify it empirically with this data. And you might be thinking, well, again, I'm early stage. I don't have any data yet. We're early stage. We don't have any type of subscribers. If we did, we could raise money, or if we wouldn't need to raise money. I hear that all the time. There's no one slide that will tank you in your pitch. And so if you legitimately have no traction, then you might just have to accept the reality that, again, that's going to have a negative impact on the persuasiveness of your pitch. But what I would say is that you can create traction. You have the ability through the lean startup method to go out and survey people. You have the ability to find a group of friends and do a small pilot. Like, if you really grind it, you can find some way to test your hypotheses outside of just hoping the audience trusts what it is that you're telling them. Next up in our story is your IP moat. So your IP moat is the protections against someone from just stealing your idea. If you have an idea, awesome. But if you're telling me right now that your idea is going to be the next billion-dollar idea, then okay, I believe you. But if I believe you, then your competitors might believe you. And if your competitors might believe you, then they might just copy you. And so I want to know something that prevents them from doing that. Obviously, the big dog in the room is going to be utility patent. Utility patents are great, but even trade secrets. If you have some proprietary understanding of something, how something works, or if it's a very complicated way to arrive at the solution that you did, or if you have a somehow you have a trademark that has a lot of value, like maybe you're a very popular influencer, or you're really great at marketing, you're able to leverage that brand. If you can get Kim Kardashian to put it on her Instagram, for example. But show me something like if without some sort of IP moat or IP barrier, it means that you run the risk of kind of doing R&D for your competitors, where you go out, you use investor money to build out what it is you're doing, but then they just kind of, copy you. And not to say that that's always an issue. If you are first to market and can aggregate enough users, Snapchat, for example, there's no reason that Facebook could have copied them earlier. They just didn't feel like they needed to. And they were able to build a big enough audience and leverage that into something that now people copy them, but it doesn't matter because they leverage their trademark and other things that keep their competitors at bay. But again, if you can show this, it is a huge de-risking factor, especially to early stage investors, that you have that ability to keep those potential IP poachers at bay. Once you get through your problem, your solution, can I make money with your market? How are you going to get to market? Who's in the market that's going to be upset that I'm there? What's going to keep them at bay? Why should all the things that we talked about before? This is when I usually bring in the team slide. And so this is highly controversial. There are people that will tell me, well, no, Shaun, you should have team slide up at the top of your slide deck. And I say, I will fight you in the street. And the reason for that is because if you have a friendly audience, if you have an audience that has been like warm introduced or already knows you or just something like that, having your team slide up above can be okay, because it helps to remind them that they know you, remind them what the relationship is, or remind them kind of, okay, these are the people I told you about, and they get to see your face shine and whatever. But if they don't know you, and if, again, we're targeting general investors, ROI-focused critical investors who are trying to quickly identify, do I care enough to listen, or do I want to go back to my phone and scroll through the other pitch decks that people have emailed me? then we want to use that first bit of our storytelling to quickly establish interest with investors, help them understand what it is you do, the context of what it is you do. And then at that point, hopefully they want to get to know you. They want to know, are you the right team? And that's why we have that team slide a bit later in the deck. The team slide comes in at a point where they should be hooked. They believe it's real. They're interested in investing, but ultimately they're like, are you the right jockeys for this investment? And so when it comes to jockeys, we want to show them off. The jockey to many investors is more important than the horse. Like knowing that you have a competent team that has experience, that has previous startups that they've done, it goes a long way. But what we want to see on the team slide is is to persuade the audience that you have all the people that you need on your team. Like if you're a technical type of app, you have a technical founder or a CTO or someone that can help. If you're a medical related app, does anyone have medical experience? Like I want to be able to quickly see, like, do I believe this team is ready to take my money and convert it into progress? Or is it missing, any big ticket items? So are they gonna have to hire someone? Do they know they need to hire someone? It's okay if you need to hire, as long as you know who that person is. But we want to show them off on this slide, and we want to show them off in a way that for a presentation deck quickly gets across to the audience what it is you do and why you should care, why this person is someone that's worthy of being on a team slide. Have a professional photo. There's no reason these days not to have a little bit of polish and just kind of look nice. And I say that because I've seen some really bad photos of people like in public restrooms, like taking selfies with a greasy camera. And again, like that's not going to be the reason someone doesn't invest in you. And I'm not saying that a little way harshly on that, but it's those little touches to know that if you have an eye for detail, it goes a long way. The photo that you see of me right here was taken with my cell phone in the hallway of my house. And then I photoshopped out the background to have that kind of corporate, high, corporate office kind of look overlooking LA. Again, it's just a little bit of polish, goes a long way. The next thing is your name and title. It might seem obvious, but people always forget to add the title portion to their team slide. And I want to know, like, who's the founder, who's the CEO, who's the CTO, who's the marketing person. I want to know what are the roles that you're actually doing to keep this company alive. I want to see brag points. Now is not the time to be humble. In a presentation deck, there should be a handful of big ticket items that establish credibility and experience. I'm pitching to you right now about how to raise money in the startup world. And so the brag points are like, hey, you should know I've founded companies before, I've raised money, and I have big fancy brands that are attached to me that kind of helps you validate that this isn't just some random person that Phil found on LinkedIn to talk to you today. But again, we want to identify that. Don't be shy, but don't be wordy as well. Notice that these are quick for you to digest. It's not a whole paragraph biography of who I am, because if it was, you wouldn't read it. And if you don't read it, then it wouldn't have the value I want. The last thing is take advantage of logos. Companies have spent billions of dollars to beat their brands into the brains of audiences so that someone can recognize a logo quicker than they can ever, recognize the word. So like if I just had in Times New Roman, Y Combinator, you would read it. And after you read it, you would process it and you would reflect and be like, oh, hey, I know what that is. But by having the logo there, and like before the slide loaded, it should have triggered that, like, oh, I know that. Take advantage of that, because the more that we can reduce the amount of processing and reading time from the audience while they're listening to your deck, the more that they can just be absorbed in kind of the experience and not be, forced to ignore you while they're reading and thinking. We want everything to flow, everything kind of connect to itself. Next up, excuse me, that cough's coming back. Next up is a horrible slide that always gives people a lot of problems, which is your financial revenue ramp. So let's start off with what not to do. This. In email decks or appendices, something like this might fly, but even then, arguably, this is an assault on the senses. To truly read through and digest all the information that you see on this slide right now, it would take you at least a few attentive minutes, which people don't have. Like, this slide might be up for like 30 seconds when you're running through a pitch. And so if it takes 5 minutes to read it and I only got 30 seconds, we already agree that no one's going to read it. And so why pretend like these numbers all have to be there? Especially when we both know year 5 revenues aren't actually going to be 159,011,891. So why pretend when we can just round up? A lot easier. Like, we just reduced all of that eye strain, all of that information, all of that data now is reduced to this, which you can absorb a bit quicker, you can enjoy a bit quicker. Still not great though. Again, this kind of goes above and beyond what you would do for especially like a 10-minute pitch or 15-minute pitch. And so we refine it a bit more. We get down to like, what is the core of what an investor might be interested in? And that's probably going to be like your revenues, your EBITDA, maybe your margins, but still not quite what we're looking for. We want to have something visually engaging. Doesn't have to look exactly like this, but something that allows me to actually see that revenue ramp, that influx of making money and becoming successful and selling things. Seeing like, what are the actual year by year metrics that drive those revenues? Doesn't have to look like this. This is one that we did for one of our clients, which is a super complicated market where they're going to start in knees and then work their way up to working in spines. This was something that they were trying to work on for a 9-minute pitch. And so again, though this, I hope you would agree, is aesthetically pleasing, still visually complicated, especially for a 9-minute pitch. And so what we did is we switched over to a more refined, streamlined, like, look, this is what their path to revenue looks like. It's enough to show that you've calculated it, to show that there's that growth, and to get that second meeting. And you gotta have it. Like, you gotta have that actual commitment to like, this is what, my calculations show with my assumptions in place of how we're going to make money. Because without it, it's just a risk point. It tells me as an investor that you don't know. Like, you don't know what it might be in 5 years, even though we know it's kind of a, exercise in the imagination. The ability to have that imagination and apply your assumptions to math in a spreadsheet and pop out this revenue ramp goes a long way to showing sort of confidence and understanding in your market. Coming up towards the end, one of the most important slides you need to have is an ask, a call to action. So if you're raising money, you need to ask for money. That might sound silly, but I went to an investment conference earlier in the year, 260 startups pitched, and 40% of them forgot to ask for money. And they paid a lot of money to pitch, but people sometimes feel uncomfortable or whatever it is. You have to make sure you ask for money. And if you're not raising money yet, ask for something. Anytime that you are convening any number of eyeballs to listen to you and to focus and to give you their attention, ask for something. Ask for connections, ask for introductions, ask for feedback, ask for anything. Because if you don't ask for something, then what was the point? It was just show and tell to say like, hey, this is what I'm doing, and then buy. No, like leverage their attention to get you something out of it. Ideally, it's going to be fundraising, but that could just be strategic partners or feedback or something. Like, get familiar with asking for something. If it is money that you're asking for, we want to see a use of funds. And so use of funds is just putting your money to work. I want to see like, okay, you're going to put money into marketing, you're going to put money into dev. Like, at the end of the day, we're trying to produce something that looks like this, like a pie chart breakdown of where is that money going, so that I understand that you have a plan, you know how it's going to do it, how it's going to be deployed. And again, you treat me in a way that I can be critical of it. I can nitpick. Do I believe that you're putting enough into marketing? Do I believe development is going to be that cheap? It's another slide that ties together in all of those numbers that we previously talked about. Last up in this mix, or heading last up, and I'm doing kind of good on time, so I'll speed it up. It's a common slide that startups forget about, but you have to have some sort of exit strategy. Or again, I'll put an asterisk. You don't have to, but you're going to want to have an exit strategy. Why? Because investors only get paid when there's some sort of liquidity event. They don't get money back if they put it in the piggy bank and then it just becomes a passion project that lives on indefinitely. I mean, again, maybe there's a dividend or some whatever, but realistically speaking, investors are looking for either A, you're looking to be acquired, or B, you're going to go, IPO route. And what I'd like to know in your exit strategy is, have you identified potential acquirers? If you are planning on doing an IPO, does anyone have experience with that? Like, how are you planning on approaching that? I want to know that you've thought through your exit so that I know you want to exit, so that I know I'm not investing in someone's hobby or lifestyle brand or company. The last slide then in your pitch deck is a summary, because at this point, we've gone through the entire story. We've explained the problem, why it is you're here to talk to me, what's the pain you're solving, how you're solving it, how we're going to make money, who else is going to be mad that we're making money that they want to make, how you're going to keep those people at bay, who's on the team, like everything. This has been a lot of information. So at the end, we want to make sure that we have those 4 or 5 bits of big ticket items, maybe the size of your market, how strong your IP is, that they can walk away with. And it's that last little bit to tell them what you told them in a way that they can take and take with them as they go home, talk to their loved ones, talk to their partners, and figure out whether or not they actually want to invest. And so, with that said, thank you so much for your time. Again, I know we covered a lot. I hope you enjoyed this trip through a pitch deck. I invite you all to, add me on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out to my team or I if you have any questions. We're happy to review your deck and give you feedback. But on that note, I'll